Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. This is DAG's monthly meeting for May of 2023. My name is Eli Storch, chair of the Design Advocacy Group, and I'm thrilled to have you. We were lucky recently to be in person for our first monthly meeting in some time when we talked about the capping project of 676. I have to get that video up online, but for folks who are unable to attend, you'll be able to see that pretty soon. I need to put that on the website. So as we kick off today, I would love to have everybody, as we do when we're in person, introduce themselves. Rather than going around the room, if you go to the chat and put your name in, what brings you here today, and since we're talking rail park, let us know your favorite park. Anywhere, anytime.
Or your favorite railroad.
You can do that too, but most importantly, please introduce yourself to the group. As we begin today, we say farewell to our lovely DAG fellow, Lachelle Weathers. She's just graduated with her Master of Architecture from Penn, is off to work for 1100 Architect in New York. So she's got big plans and is doing big things. And I'm thrilled to welcome, though she couldn't be here today, Nika Faulkner, who will be our new DAG fellow. Nika also just graduated with a master's degree in historic preservation from Jefferson. So she will be working at Heritage Consulting Group and doing all sorts of interesting things on the historic preservation side and helping us out with DAG. So I am sad to see Lachelle go because she's done so much for us, but I'm excited about Nika joining us, and you will get to see her face next month when she's able to attend. So times change, but we wish Lachelle all the best. So if you have any announcements, events, things that are going on in the community you want to share with us, please put them in the chat and I'll call on you to raise your hand, say hi, tell us what you're working on. David Brownlee, I know you had an update on the Roundhouse. Could you share that with us?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the Preservation Alliance has put up on the web under savetheroundhouse.org a big collection of historic photographs and a bunch of the renderings that have been commissioned to show how the site might be developed for all kinds of community-oriented activities, including housing, while preserving the Roundhouse, including opening up a connection between what, broadly speaking, is the Chinatown neighborhood and Franklin Square, all of which looks very interesting. That's at savetheroundhouse.org. And it has been reported that the nomination of the Roundhouse, the designation by the Historical Commission, will come up for review in the near future. It has been basically waiting on the city's investigative process. But there isn't a word yet on when the RFP would go out for developers for the sale of the site. That's not yet clear when that would occur. And I just want to put in a plug too. If there's something that you've seen that you think is interesting and you'd like to write it up, or there's some issue that you're annoyed about, or that you're really excited about that you'd like to write up, the DAG forum on our website is available for expressions of personal opinion, basically an op-ed column place. We'd love to have more contributions to that. Express yourselves. If you have any questions about it, you'll see that there's a link on the website under DAG forum to my name, and you can email me and we can talk about the parameters. Really, it's an open field, and it is, as I say, a place for personal expression. Thanks.
Thank you, David. In terms of upcoming DAG events, we are sticking with sort of rails and trails for our next monthly meeting. So Thursday, June 29th at 10 o'clock, Bob Thomas and Patrick Starr are going to talk about the Circle Trail Network. I'll drop that link in the chat, but that will be, they're talking about 390 miles of multi-purpose trails in southeastern Pennsylvania, how the network was formed, where the network wants to go, how people can get involved in adopting bits and pieces of it and making sure that continues to be a really thriving piece of recreational and environmental infrastructure for the community. So that's Thursday, June 29th. Marcia Moss, who handles our event programming, wasn't able to make it today, but she's been putting that one together, and we are close to announcing a July event. So stay tuned for our e-blast on that, and check out our website. So that should all be coming up soon. Other stuff before we get started, if you have any technical difficulties today, please reach out to me, let me know, and I'll do my best to help you out. And on the DAG side, we're also beginning our summer program. We have 2 summer interns who are working on an urban design handbook. Nando Macaulay from the DAG steering committee is leading that. We have Richard Sedende and Brandon Jones, who are 2 students. One's from the GSD at Harvard, that's Brandon, and Richard's at Penn State. So they're going to be working, much as we did last summer with streeteries, they're going to be working to build some urban design guidelines and recommendations for the city of Philadelphia. There'll be folks from the DAG steering committee involved in that. Veronica and CPI are also going to be involved. So if you're interested, I'll drop another link in the chat with some places you can email to get involved and get looped in on what we're doing there. And then I believe it's September, it might be October, during Design Philadelphia, that we'll be presenting the findings of that to the DAG community. So stay tuned on that. So let's get into it. We have a great program. I'm been looking forward to hearing more on these next steps for quite some time, and I'm going to pass it off to my colleague Veronica Ayala Flores. Veronica was our first ever DAG fellow, and she can't get rid of us. I would say we can't get rid of her, but we don't want to get rid of her, but she can't get rid of us. So she is now a member of the DAG steering committee, as well as working for the Citizens Planning Institute. So Veronica, take it away.
Thanks for that intro. And thank you everybody for joining us this morning. It's a lovely day. So I'm excited to introduce Rebecca. Rebecca and I met while we were working at Local Initiative Support Corporation. And I was so thrilled when they got the job and then they were coming to Philly as executive director of Friends of the Rail Park. So Friends of the Rail Park is the organization that is dedicated to bringing this idea of a vision for a 3-mile greenway and infrastructure reuse project, the rail park, to life. They are an urban planner and historic preservationist by training, and they bring experience in community development, philanthropy, and arts and culture. So I'm really thrilled by all that experience and combination of expertise. Rebecca is also the 2022-2023 Fulcrum Fellow at the Center for Community Investment. Check them out. They do some cool work. And Rebecca has also been recognized as a Funders Network Places Fellow and a fellow and co-facilitator of the Salzburg Global Seminar. I can't pronounce that, but check it out as well. She received her MS from the University of Pennsylvania Wainsmith School of Design and a BA from University of Illinois. So with that, Rebecca, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Veronica. I am going to fumble around here and share my screen, which, oh wait, can I actually, okay, can do that. Okay, you think I'd be better at this after 2 years of doing this, but here we go. Just full screen mode. Awesome, there we go. So hey everyone, I'm Rebecca Cordes-Chan, Executive Director of Friends of the Rail Park. I started in March of 2020, so and was also new to Philadelphia, as Veronica noted. So I'm not sure if that means I've been at this for 6 months or 10 years, but either way, very happy to be here today and presenting in front of all of you. I just want to start by saying there are many, many people who have been working on the rail park and advocating for this vision for many years, far longer than I've been doing this. So I'm lucky and honored that I get to be the face of this project today, but the rail park exists but for the dedication of so many individuals and organizations and people who just really see and believe in this vision and are bringing it to life every day. So with that, as I said, Executive Director of Friends of the Rail Park. This is our mission, our vision. I'm not going to read that to you, but the idea is to build bold, transformative, and inclusive public space that's connecting people to the city and each other. We do three things. We activate and steward phase 1 of the rail park, which is open. I encourage you all to go if you have not been. We are also advocating, planning, and resourcing future phases of the rail park. And we are also advancing equitable development strategies in support of the communities that we are a part of. And I'll get more into that in just a little bit. There are people behind the rail park. We are now a staff of 5. We have a 13-member board of directors and are growing and work with a number of different committees. We also work with numerous volunteers who contribute hundreds of hours annually to keeping the park clean, green, and activated, but also helping with our events, serving on those committees, et cetera. And it's really an honor to be able to work with all those individuals from all over the city, but in particular the neighborhoods that the park is a part of. I realize there are people on this call who, again, could probably give this presentation better than I can, but for those of you who are not familiar, I'm going to do a quick run through of just the different sections, kind of high level overview here. If you are interested in the railroad history or kind of the deep cuts on the history of the rail park and railroads in Philadelphia, this is not going to be that presentation, but I would encourage you to come on one of our tours where we have docents who give a much deeper dive into that history and that part of the park. But there are 3 sections. I just said I wasn't going to talk a lot about history, but I do like showing this slide because the rail park very much is bound up in the development of systems and kind of the movements, whether that's the City Beautiful movement, urban renewal, et cetera. The rail park has both benefited and been negatively impacted by those systems and those policies and those developments in Philadelphia. And so I always like to show this slide just to show kind of what was happening big picture in Philadelphia and what was happening with the railroad and all that good stuff. But just to say that these are all these histories are intertwined. But basically the rail park, 3 miles long, 3 distinct sections, touches 10 plus neighborhoods, 50 city blocks. The major 3 sections are pictured here. We always talk about the tunnel. The tunnel was originally constructed as part of the City Beautiful movement. And through a lot of wheeling and dealing with the Pennsylvania and Reading railroads, we have this map here that shows it today. The tracks are both buried and elevated. And we'll get more into that elevated section in just a moment. As I said, it was buried as part of the City Beautiful movement. This is actually the tunnel in construction. This is, I think, at the very late 1800s, maybe even the early 1900s, this photo was taken. Just for reference, this is the tunnel when it was completed. I believe this photo is from 1906. I can't remember exactly. As you can see in this photo, the art museum is not yet constructed, so it has to be pre-1916. But here's the entrance to the tunnel today. And I think my next photo will show this. This is actually even a dated photo when I think about this. There's actually a building that sits over the top of this now, but you can still see the entrance to the tunnel here. This is now the Whole Foods that we all know on 22nd and Pennsylvania. But the tunnel is, it's 50 feet wide, 25 feet deep. One of the kind of known or the exciting features about it are these light shafts that you can see that let, historically they're letting all the kind of pollutants and chemicals and steam and hot air off of the trains that were using it. But today lets this really beautiful light into the space, brick vaulted ceilings. It's a lot of space. This runs underneath Pennsylvania Avenue. It's almost a mile long. The next section is the cut. The cut is below grade but open to the sky. As you can see here, it runs from basically just behind the Inquirer building to the mouth of the tunnel, that photo that I was just showing a few moments ago. It was originally on the site of the Coquanana Creek, and there were many Lenni Lenape settlements along said creek. It was then purchased first as a canal. The idea was to ideally connect the Delaware to the Schuylkill. That project went bankrupt, and it was then purchased by the railroads. I show this photo because it was purchased originally by, I believe it was the Pennsylvania, then becoming Reading Railroad on the tracks itself, but the Baldwin Locomotive Company developed all around that track. And so these are some of those photos. There are very few remnants of that Baldwin Locomotive kind of company left, but one of the last ones remaining is the Sellers Bridge, which you can see today off of the bridge on 16th Street, the pedestrian bridge rather on 16th Street. Here we go. And this is just, again, to give you an idea of historically what was happening here. I feel like we often have these very romanticized ideas of what the railroads were like, but in fact, they were quite smoggy and dirty. But in any case, again, the cut would be this space here today. All of this track has since been removed and a lot of it is overgrown, part of it is paved. As you can see, a very different picture from what today we kind of know as Logan Square and Spring Garden in the campus of Community College of Philadelphia. Here are some more contemporary photos. We still have these historic railings here, which I think are really beautiful, as well as the ramps below. Just more photos of the cut. Again, what that Sellers Bridge looks like today. And this is also, I just love to show this photo, an activation from 2019 that was a partnership between SEPTA, Community College of Philadelphia, Mural Arts Philadelphia, and of course our organization, Friends of the Rail Park, as well as numerous artists who activated the cut for one weekend. And this particular activation was known as the Moon Viewing Platform. And then finally, the viaduct. This is probably the most well-known portion of the rail park, aside from phase one, of course. The viaduct is about a mile long. It starts at Vine Street, was actually historically went all the way to the Reading Terminal Market, but was cut off by the construction of the Vine Street Expressway. It begins ramping up from Broad and Noble, including phase one, and goes to about 8th and Fairmount in Northern Liberties. And then it has that spur that historically would have connected back over Vine Street into the market. There it goes. This is where it begins. It goes from underneath the Inquirer building across Broad and up. In historical photos, one of the last trains to go on the tracks. You can see the Inquirer still on that building in the background. And here's an aerial view. And what I love about this photo in particular is you can see the section of the city that is actually, very stark, lots of concrete, very industrial landscape. You have this kind of ribbon of green here. And this photo is actually pre-construction, so you can see the park isn't, or phase one at least, isn't even built here. But you can see how just very green and lush this particular part of the viaduct is. Another actually dated photo, which again also speaks, I think, to the kind of fragility of the rail park in many ways. This is the Spring Garden Station. It was unfortunately demolished by Reading International a few years ago, but again, just love to show these older photos. Here's the viaduct crossing Spring Garden. You can see it kind of looms overhead, which I love. You have to kind of know what you're looking for to find it in its current state. Really great views of the city. This is from on top of the viaduct, looking towards Center City, of course. And then, of course, there's phase one. This is the exciting thing to talk about. So phase one opened in 2018. It was a partnership between the city's Parks and Recreation and Streets Department, SEPTA, our organization, Friends of the Rail Park, which didn't even have staff at the time, and then of course Center City District, which did the lion's share of the fundraising, kind of managing construction, project management in general, and kind of really bringing the project to life. So big shout out to Center City District. It was getting into it. There we go. Sorry. Kind of getting into the original. How the project, or at least phase one, came to be. It was really a group of neighbors initially who, were living in what is now known as the Callowhill and Chinatown North neighborhoods, and looking at these unused structures that were already, overgrown and full of life, and thinking to themselves, hey, there isn't any existing park space or green space in our neighborhood. Why don't we just make that into our park space? So those neighbors, some of whom are still on my board today, started talking to, from the way that they tell the stories, basically anyone that they could, speak to or get to listen to them, and eventually brought more and more partners on board. Specifically those ones that I just mentioned. They gave tours, like this photo here today. There were lots of playful engagements, like this poster on the right side of the screen. And fast forwarding through many years of advocacy, fundraising, and getting other people on board, we're able to bring the project to life. So this is just some, construction shots, the ribbon cutting, and then what in this photo looks like a very barren park, but has since, fortunately grown in and is super lush, but bringing phase one to life. Here are some shots of phase one. I would, be remiss to not mention that phase one, the designs were done by Studio Brian Haynes, and we continue to work with them, and they, do lots of donate lots of pro bono time to us in terms of keeping the park, kind of in the spirit of its original plantings and keeping the park lush and green, and we are very appreciative of that. Construction was done by urban engineers, signage and wayfinding by Cloud Geshin. And so it really is, to me at least, a project that is by and for Philadelphia and the great talent and design talent that is here. I'm going to keep scrolling through some more photos. Here's just a before shot of the viaduct, and there's the after. The park is planted with many native plantings. There's over 1,000 native plants on the rail park, which I think is super interesting and exciting. And a lot of the plants were kind of mirroring what was found on the existing viaduct when it was pre-construction. Here's a shot of our swings. These are probably the most iconic kind of design element of the rail park, or at least phase one today. I love that they're oversized. It's everyone from little kids to adults who get on there, and you can see that like instant kind of joy when they're on the swing and kind of enjoying themselves. But I really dislike showing pictures of an empty park, and so naturally we decided to program it. And so again, this is kind of before my time. This is actually a pre-pandemic shot of the an activation that was done by Ballet X on phase one of the rail park. But these activations range from dance like this, to plant swaps, to screen printing. And I love these kids give me so much hell all the time. When's the next phase coming, Rebecca? It's really actually a lot of fun, but to have kind of like regulars and people using the park on a regular basis is awesome. Our signature event is the Lunar New Year celebration that typically happens in January or February. It's been really nice to have this come back and with force and passion as the pandemic has waned. We've also done a number of kind of smaller, more targeted events. So one of the events that we started actually during the pandemic is an event called Elder Hour. This is basically a happy hour for seniors in Chinatown, but really anyone is able to come and join us, and we welcome that. But realizing that because this is one of the only accessible green spaces in this part of the city, that we need to go out of our way to welcome people, seniors in particular, who maybe felt unsafe in public space or needed kind of those extra precautions to feel that level of safety that would enable them to enjoy public space. And so we run this program in the spring and fall. But again, as you can see here, some of our regulars really going out of our way to mask and to make people feel welcome and safe on the park. With the kind of waning of the pandemic, we've been able to go back to some of the larger events, as I was just mentioning a few moments ago. This is 2 shots from our Rail Park block party last year, formerly known as the Rail Park birthday party. This is Snack Time Philly playing on our electric platform. And then we also had an activation of the space that was actually up for the whole summer, but debuted at the block party last year by the People's Paper Co-op. And it was an installation called Liberation Journeys. Temporary activation. We also, realizing that some people will not feel safe in public space for quite some time, and maybe not ever, and also wanting to enable people who maybe can't regularly visit or attend rail park events to still be able to access the resources that we have available there. We created the youth activity guide in 3 languages. This is written to curriculum standards, and so we can pass it out to schools all over the city. If you complete all of the activities, you get a little prize at the end, which I thought was really sweet. But we've also developed a number of, I call them audio guides, but my staff calls them podcasts called Song of the Rail Park, also translated into 3 different languages. But this is everything from kind of a Rail Park 101 tour. So you can either listen at home or actually use it to guide your experience on phase 1. To we have episodes or kind of tours rather that are by kind of a wide range of different subjects. So people talking about kind of the public art, pardon me, that's out there, the ecology. We actually worked with the Institute on Disability at Temple University and met someone through that partnership who's blind, who actually did kind of an accessibility guide to the rail park as well. So again, a range of kind of options to listen there, but to me, what I really like about it is it shows all these different perspectives and all these different kind of themes that surface in public space. This is just a quick shot of our website, gonna flip through that. And then this is one of our signature community engagement and outreach kind of programs, but also just kind of tools that we're using at the moment. It's called the Rail Park Time Capsule. It is a digital public archive and cultural asset map that kind of asks the question, what do you love about your neighborhood, including or not including public space? What is a memory you'd like to share? What is a wish and aspiration for the future? People from the full kind of expanse of the neighborhood, so all 10 neighborhoods are able to submit. You can also just submit if you've been to the rail park and want to share something. But we've collected over, I think, 400 submissions at this point, and it's everything from I really want the rail park to do this, this, and this in the future to I think one of my favorites is, I remember riding the rail line when it was still active as a kid, and someone including a photo of themselves and uploading that into the archive. I really like this because I feel like it is kind of democratizing the kind of the voices and the stories that are connected to the rail park. We eventually will close the time capsule, so to say, but at the moment it's all living online. So it also enables people to look at what their neighbors have shared, what others have shared. And then on the back end, we're also using this as an engagement tool to understand, what is it that people want to see in public space going forward? What are the values that underlie the memories and the stories that they're sharing? And how do we incorporate that into our programming that we're doing, which we can do on a much shorter time span than, for example, planning for a second phase and how we're collecting that input and engagement. So here's just an example of one of the memories that was selected. So that was just a quick rundown of kind of the programming, what we're doing on phase one. But there's a lot of work to do with the rail park. And that's, when I was, started the talk with kind of activating and programming and stewarding phase one, I feel like I've spoken to that. I'll get to kind of the advancing, phase two and how we're thinking about that. But the third piece of what we do as an organization, which is advocating for equitable development strategies in the 10 neighborhoods that we are a part of. That is really coming out of that we are a Highline Network members. So we've had the opportunity to talk to other infrastructure reuse projects across the country. But B, we also just are thinking about and kind of know the narrative of what happened on the Highline and what they have shared, the Highline in particular has shared as kind of missteps in terms of you can have a very successful kind of opening and operation of public space, but unfortunately, in some cases, it's also come with a lot of displacement of existing communities, whether that's physical, economic, or cultural displacement. So what we're trying to do with our equitable development planning process is take advantage of reports like this. This is a policy link report that was done in partnership with Philadelphia Chinatown Development Corporation and Sojourner Consulting that was released, I believe, in summer of 2020, but was really looking at the impact of the rail park, on phase one and what the impact already has been, but B, projecting that across the 10 neighborhoods that the rail park is a part of. And these projections showed that around phase one and really projecting across the full 3 miles of the park, that there has been a between 16 and 22% property value increase between a 0 and half mile, basically the 10-minute walk shed. That property value increase has been felt across that 10-minute walk shed. And so what this report, what I really like about it is that it talked to people in Chinatown through a multi-day kind of convening to really understand, hey, how do we take this data, this analysis that we're doing on property value, but B, how are we linking that and connecting that back to what people, and this was focused on one neighborhood, obviously it's Chinatown because PCBC was commissioning this report, connect that back to kind of the hopes, the visions, the kind of the dreams that Chinatown has for its neighborhood, and how are we kind of asking these questions around who benefits, who pays, and who decides when a development like this happens. And so taking this back to what we are doing with our equitable development planning work is we are basically saying, the rail park will have an impact on the 10 neighborhoods that it's a part of. How do we flip this narrative, which I feel like is typically, hey, neighborhood, this is a large development that's coming in. How are you going to help us build this park? Flipping that around and saying, how can we work together, neighborhood, to accomplish whatever goals you have around, whether that's housing, job creation, workforce development, whatever it happens to be, how can we align our efforts going forward? And so our goal through the equitable development planning process is to ask these questions around how do we build and steward an equitable organization in the park? What do we need to do in partnership to contribute to communities and mitigate the impacts of this development? And then how can we contribute as the rail park to policy or systems level change for the city and region? And really taking advantage of the kind of the geography of 10 neighborhoods and the scale that includes, but also thinking about, how are we creating shared priorities across these 10 neighborhoods? How are we creating a pipeline of kind of like opportunities for development and deals? And then what is the enabling environment that we need to create, whether that's, from a policy or development landscape? And so we are just starting on this. This is slow going work, as you can imagine. We have started with a preliminary round of stakeholder interviews to identify said neighborhood priorities. We're also lucky in that Philly is a very planned city. And so we've also just been reviewing existing neighborhood plans. To be honest, some of these are somewhat dated and maybe the plans have shifted a little bit. And then in other cases, they're very useful and we have a lot to hit the ground running with. We are fortunate to have received a William Penn Foundation grant, as well as a little bit of money from the Department of Community and Economic Development's Keystone Communities planning grant to resource this work. And so we'll be really diving in as we continue throughout this year. So that's our equitable development planning work. Please stay tuned for more on that. But I think what we are probably most excited for here today is the Rail Park feasibility or visioning and feasibility study that we recently completed in 2022. So when I first took this job, I was very excited about the Rail Park. But when I started, no one had really asked questions around, this is a 3-mile vision. Where are we going next? And how are we going to scale and phase this? How much is it going to cost? What is a timeline for any of this? So there's some core questions that were core and looming questions that were unanswered. Also with kind of new leadership, with me as the executive director, but also we have a new board chair, or at least at the time, a new board chair. And then also thinking about the pandemic and how we are, with this project, extremely reliant on our partners, and not only the partners that are property owners, but partners that are adjacent to the park. And of course, from a programmatic and kind of community development standpoint, the partners that also have either place-based or thematic reasons to be invested in the rail park. So how do we kind of organize and understand how people's priorities have maybe shifted or changed over the course of the pandemic, and where does that leave us today? And so in 2021, we hired Sasaki to work with us to answer some of these questions. And so flip through here, we had 3 major goals, which were basically answering those questions. So is this project even possible? Are the necessary stakeholders at this stage, the very, very early stage, property owners, are they still interested in pursuing this project? How much is it going to cost? And how do we phase this? And then, as this slide says, kind of establishing an initial conceptual vision, doing the capacity building and understanding the partnerships that need to be in place and what capacity we need to build as an organization to actually bring this to life. And then, of course, an action plan. So where do we go from here? We were fortunate in that we had a lot of great existing data and research to go off of. In particular, there was a really great report that was done by the Community Design Collaborative, focusing on the city branch, that was really a great jumping off point, as well as a number of other reports as well that we were able to incorporate into the study. And we will, just so we all know, be doing the full release of the study in June. This is just kind of a high level overview at this point. But what I liked about the study is it affirmed and confirmed a lot of the things that we already knew about the rail park and its potential benefits on the 10 neighborhoods and the over 100,000 people that are in its footprint. So this is just a quick slide. I actually think that this is undercounted in many ways, but more on that later. It is also in alignment with the DVRPC's long range plan. So just nice to have kind of this scan of existing plans and being able to kind of align what we are trying to do at the rail park with existing plans in the city and kind of region. And then it has a number of benefits. I'm not going to read these slides to you. This is a group that's very in tune with kind of the benefits around transportation mobility in public space, the kind of health, wellness, and social benefits that public space has on a city like Philadelphia, as well as the environment and climate resiliency. I do like to show this slide, however, because I don't know if anyone remembers when 676 flooded in 2021, but the cut is like right here and it was bone dry, and it just has me thinking all sorts of thoughts about stormwater and how we can design for that. But similarly, lots of economic development benefits potentially. This, of course, thinking about our equitable development planning process is a double-edged sword, but it still will have these benefits. And so where the study landed was actually doing this kind of analysis, breaking what we have always referred to as kind of the 3 sections of the rail park actually into 4, and adding this section called the soft cut over here, where the tunnel exits and you're still kind of like on rail park kind of trail, but it's not actually in the tunnel, so added that. And the other thing that I really like is at this very, very early stage where we do not have site control, where we are essentially, we need to be very flexible. None of these plans are, kind of finalized or even close to being finalized. They actually built us a very flexible dashboard so we can look at these sections down to the block level, and we can add different layers and kind of features, if you will. So that's everything from access points to public art to amenities, things like adding like an amphitheater and public art and a fountain, levels of finish. So is this more of a kind of like wild and overgrown space, similar to what you would feel if you were to go up there today? Or is it more of a polished, kind of highly developed, highly finished space? And using cost analysis that was based off of what was at the time in 2022 real cost numbers, but also looking at comps from across the country. And actually, I think, no, just US examples, not international examples. We're able to triangulate, okay, if you add, these 6 access points, these 2, fountains, this public art feature, this level of finish, kind of spit out a loose number around how much it can cost, or how much it would cost. And that's down to the block level, which is also very, very convenient. Overall, the project is anticipated to cost between $250 and $300 million. Again, this is in 2022 dollars. I know the economy is doing all sorts of funny things right now, so we'll see. But kind of broke it down into this as well, into these different sections and these different cost ranges, as well as in a ideal scenario, you have site control, you have all your funding in place, approximately how long it would take to develop each section. And again, we can kind of expand or contract this based on, or down to the block level, based on whatever kind of scope of a project that we're looking at the time. But again, high level numbers for those 4 sections that were identified. And then finally, we're able to kind of, drilling into, this is just one example of what a space like the Cut could look like. Again, with this slider of more programmed, of course, being more expensive, or more natural, or less finished, obviously less money. So I'm trying to just make sure I got through all my notes here. I would just say overall, it was really interesting to see, again, at this early kind of visioning study phase, and inviting, all the potential, at least property owners and people who have direct control over developing the rail park. It was instructive to see who actually attended the said workshops and meetings and who participated and who, kindly, declined our invitations. It seems like we'll be going west based on partner interest rather than the kind of east and into the viaduct section. And so at this stage, we are pushing forward with a phase 2. We're working on site control. We do not have it yet, and so I unfortunately cannot say exactly where we're hoping phase 2 will be, but we are trying to raise pre-development funds. We're doing so many briefings, similar to the one that we are doing today, or that I'm doing today, with elected officials, property owners, other stakeholders. I will also say, and I feel like this is a question I get quite often, when are you going to start hardcore community engagement? And I feel like until we have kind of that MOU and or that site control for a phase 2, we don't want to get people excited about a thing that is maybe not happening yet. And so once we have site control, get ready for a lot of community engagement. But at this stage, the focus is primarily on elected officials, property owners, and adjacent property owners to make sure that we just have site control and access. And then finally, we are building on, as the, kind of going back to the original goals of the plan, building our organizational capacity and governance model so that we're ready and prepared to move forward with a phase 2. I didn't call this out specifically or very concretely, but phase 1 was developed, really spearheaded by Center City District, with, kind of the city, SEPTA, philanthropic community coming, and of course, Friends of the Rail Park coming in as additional partners. Today, phase 1 of the rail park is still owned technically by SEPTA. It's conveyed to the city through a lease and managed through Parks and Recreation, with Friends of the Rail Park coming in to do additional stewardship and maintenance. It is unclear if that same governance model or the kind of the Center City District model will be the model going forward for a phase 2. And so that's what we're really trying to nail down today. But with that, I think that's it. Veronica, is there any questions? Or I feel like I just blazed through a lot of information, and I feel like this is a group that I'm happy to field questions and be more conversational with. Yeah.
Thank you, Rebecca. Round of applause, I guess.
On the Zoom.
So we had a question around what phase 2 will be, which you named. You can't answer right now. But was there anything that surprised you or struck you from the results of the feasibility study?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I think it's like who of the stakeholders actually showed up and who either ignored us or declined. And I think that was definitely a shift from kind of the pre-pandemic time to now. I'll just say SEPTA in particular has been such a pleasure to work with and has been super cooperative. They attended all of our workshops. They've just been a great partner. And I think part of that is because of the success of phase 1. And we have 15,000 people a year coming out to that park now. And I think for SEPTA in particular, where everyone's always like complaining about SEPTA, like that is such a feather in their cap and to their credit in many ways. I think for me, from a process-based perspective, thinking about who and like how to actually do an actual design process for a phase 2, it has me thinking a lot about, I don't think this should be kind of an RFP or like a design competition kind of process. It should be more of almost like an RFQ. Like I think about this as like, this is a partner, whatever the design team looks like for a phase 2, this is a team rather, that we will be working with for quite a long time. And so how do we identify the values behind that team that we want to, kind of work with on a long-term basis? Not to say that Sasaki didn't do that, but it's just like, it had me thinking a lot about, and I think also like our board and the participants thinking a lot about that, of like, this is an ongoing relationship and not like a one and done, like, oh, cool, well, thanks for those renderings, we're going to get going now. So that was interesting, for sure. And also just from a cost perspective, I don't want to say that the 300 million or whatever those numbers were, that's actually, I was like ready for like, oh, this is going to be like $1 billion and you will never be able to do this. But I think if we break it down into chunks, it actually becomes a lot more manageable too.
Yeah, it's the possibilities kind of are outlined a little better, and that makes sense. Having to align values, first, and doing that work. Often we skip it, and then things fall apart. So I'm glad you guys are doing that. We have a question from Dane. Speaking about partners, has the Reading company been involved in these processes?
Yeah, so we invited them in many different ways through many different channels, and they did not participate. It's just been really unfortunate to watch, for example, the Act 135 petition fail and have, the Spring Garden station demolished. The substation that is right at the spur is being demolished as we, the demolition on that is wrapping up as we speak. And so it's again, if they were to, pick up the phone or send an email and be like, yes, we want to be a part of this process, I would welcome them in by all means. But it has been difficult to try to open up that channel. And then watch all these other kind of, like really potentially iconic parts of the viaduct be destroyed.
Yeah, no, that's definitely disappointing. We have some questions kind of more about the actual, construction. What are the plans to get underneath the old Enquirer building? And can you say more about the soft cut? So 2 different questions, but
yeah. So plans for under the Enquirer building. So there is still passage. We actually toured the Enquirer building as well as the neutrality facility, which is the 401, I always want to call it 405, 401 North Broad. So that's where historically that connection point would have been. There is still passage. There is some complications because where the passage is currently, right next to the morgue entrance. So there's some technical things that might need to get worked out. I'll also just say I'm from Chicago. We do flyovers like all the time, and so I feel like it's a thing that it needs to be sorted out. But we also can't wait. We can't like, oh, we're not gonna, keep planning until that is finished. So we just need to kind of keep pushing and hope that the momentum of having both sides of the park and kind of that need for connection happen, push the cards in our favor. And then in regards to the soft cut, so basically the soft cut, I mean, I still kind of consider this part of the tunnel, to be honest, but so the tunnel opens up, so it runs underneath Pennsylvania Avenue. It opens up at about 26 in Pennsylvania is like where the kind of the big historical mouth of the tunnel is. And then from there, it's actually, it's completely open. It's flanked on both sides by pretty tall stone walls, especially when you first exit the tunnel. But then it's grading back up to kind of ground level. And so you're in that part of, kind of the tunnel / the soft cut. You are next to active CSX line. So if you ever happen to be walking down there, do not be very careful. But the other side of it is actually, very overgrown. It kind of feels like a tree tunnel in many ways. It's flanked on both sides by enormous Paulownia trees. And it's very green. It's very, it's very grown in. And so it's deceptive because it feels like, oh, there's only the active CSX line and then just, how will there be space for all this? But if one were to kind of clear, kind of cut back a lot of that overgrown space, there's actually more than a full bay of what was rail, but is now just overgrown green space. And so I always think about, what's happening on the School River Trail and how there's actually also an active CSX line there as well. It's the same line. And so,
Right.
there's actually a lot of opportunity to use that space. I would say from a kind of organizational priority perspective, that is also right where Fairmount Park kind of opens up. And so I feel like it wouldn't make a lot of sense to have two little bits of park at like very opposite ends of the city when there's already a lot of access to green space in that part of kind of the vision. And so to me, that's something that would be perhaps bundled with the tunnel development to make sure that we're able to actually give people access to the tunnel in a safe and accessible way, but is not a huge priority at this point.
Got it. That makes sense. So you previously talked about the rail park being part of the Highline network. So you get to talk to other people doing this kind of work. That's awesome. What have you learned from those conversations with other cities? Any learned lessons? You talked about missteps, but can you expand on that?
I think there's a lot of sharing of the missteps where I'm like, oh boy, people. But I will say on a less flip note, it's interesting to see that there isn't like a silver bullet or like the playbook for how to get this. As much as we want to create the template, as much as we want to create the step-by-step, this is how the thing happens. A thing that I love about the Highline Network is people are very open about, these are the circumstances of St. Louis, or these are the circumstances of the work that I'm doing in Chicago. This is what I think you can learn from it, but also know that like these are things that are very specific to our project and our site. So with that, it has been helpful to see, how people are financing these projects, and it's very, very creative. So people are, utilizing new markets tax credits. People are, really digging deep on historic preservation and, the particular assets and resources that their community, their particular, city has on that front. But no one is, well, with the exception of a few sites where it has actually been underwritten by like, a single person who's like, yeah, I just really want to see this park happen. People have to be very, very creative. And so it's been interesting to see, what's happening in other cities and how we might apply that here and think about our own capital stack in terms of developing the project. It's also been interesting to see how there's just kind of like the financing of the projects themselves, but then there's the ongoing, operations and maintenance that needs to happen. And so how are people actually, paying for and budgeting for that? And some of the trade-offs that are happening as well. So one of the things that we are really proud of as kind of Friends of the Rail Park is that the park is always open, 24/7, it's free, it's accessible to the public. And I think that's a thing that at least the people that I see out there using it really appreciate. And we've been very steadfast about the park is never closed entirely to the public. That said, like the park also needs a lot of maintenance, and like what we're doing right now is kind of like, we're keeping it going. But as you think about expansion and paying for that in a city that continues to cut its parks and recs budget, how do we think about that? And so seeing how some sites have said, we're going to do limited license agreements. So for 10 nights a year, we actually are going to close the park. And those 10 nights are going to finance the other 355 that the park needs to be, kind of active and vibrant to the whole city. And so you kind of like looking and like studying some of those models has been interesting, especially for spaces that have been open a lot longer or, are larger. And then I think also just looking at the partnerships across public, private, and kind of NGO nonprofit sectors that people are forming is also really interesting, especially for us at this stage of like thinking about governance and how to move forward with the project as well.
Yeah, you're growing the park itself, then you're also growing the organization that
Mhm.
stewards it. So I definitely see how you guys are tackling both of them. Um, so you previously in your presentation talked a little bit about cultural displacement, general displacement. Can you tell us what that is and kind of make that connection with the practices that the rail park is putting in place to prevent this from happening?
Sure. Yeah, and I would say I don't think we've gotten it right yet, but we're certainly trying. So first, I should say I always avoid the term gentrification because it means wildly different things to different people. Some people are like, "Yeah, gentrification," and other people, it just there's like a lack of precision there that I think makes it difficult to
Mm,
talk about. So to
yes.
your point, I always use displacement. So physical displacement, there's nowhere for me to live here, or my business can no longer afford to pay the rent, or actually that's getting a little bit into economic, but there's just a lack of space to do the thing that I want to do. Economic displacement, I can't afford to live or shop here. And then to your question, the piece on around cultural displacement, I don't feel like I belong here because something has happened to shift that feeling or my ability to relate to this place. And I think the cultural displacement piece is hard because it's the softer stuff, right? Like how do you measure feelings of belonging? But I think that's where things like arts and culture strategies are really useful. And I think also thinking about just accessibility in general is very helpful. So what we're doing specifically at the Rail Park is I had mentioned we worked with the Temple Institute on Disabilities. That was professionally like life-changing work for me. In that we just realized what we can do from kind of a best practices standpoint to make phase one feel really accessible and inviting to people. And that by kind of incorporating these ideas and standards around like universal design, whether that's, programming or, eventually a phase two, really by thinking, making that, we're basically making this accessible to everyone. It's the curb cut effect idea. So now when we do any kind of program, we have a know before you go guide that is helpful for someone who maybe is sensitive to auditory stimulation. It's also helpful to someone who just wants to bring their kids and wants to know like where they can take their kids to cool down at the end of the day.
Right.
So we're doing things like that, and that's what I like about that too. It's very subtle. So we're not like, oh, we're trying to be accessible. It's like, no, here's just this thing that we're going to post on our website. We're going to post on the Eventbrite page, et cetera, that you just click on the link, it's ready for you. We do things like the time capsule that I had mentioned. So kind of collecting people's voices, memories, ideas, aspirations, et cetera, and actually using that feedback and that input. And then a thing that I'm actually really excited about is we have revamped our tour program. So it used to be like me or like someone else from our organization or board, like rattling along for 2 hours and like yelling at people in the streets, which is fine. But what I really like is we this year launched a docent-led tour program where we actually hired people from the neighborhoods that the park is a part of. They were selected because they have a particular story or a skill set or a thing that they want to share. So we have everyone, one of the guides is really excited about the public art that's along the way. One person has lived in the neighborhood their whole life. Another person is an urban ag specialist and like gives a tour about all the weeds along the rail park, which I'm like, I want to go on that tour. So each tour is a little different, but it's in the voice of a person who has a vested interest in that neighborhood and in the rail park and in some sort of whatever that particular topic or experience, lived experience or story happens to be. And I feel like, again, by kind of not having this singular voice around the park and the public space, it's helping to get at those displacement or make people feel more welcome when they go on a tour. So that's, again, kind of like all programmatically based stuff. I think there's a lot of room for expansion when we think about, actually the physical design and a phase two. But again, at this early stage, that's where we're beginning to kind of scratch at those pieces.
Yeah, I love it. I'm such a big fan of resident-led work, especially tour work. So it's really exciting to hear that that's happening for you guys. So you're clearly giving a lot of thought to the impact that this development will have on people. How are you feeling about the possibility of having a stadium as a neighbor?
I can't say I'm terribly excited about it, just given, I mean, quite frankly, the opposition of so many of our neighborhoods, particularly our neighbors, particularly in Chinatown. Like I said, a lot of our equitable development work is supporting the strategies and the goals of the neighborhoods that we work with. And so I don't really feel like it's like the rail park needs to take a stance on the stadium, but if we listen to all of our partners and our neighborhood organizations who are, not super excited about this at the moment, in some cases like outright opposing it, I feel like we need to kind of support that voice and that kind of opposition to it. The other thing that I think, even just taking a step back from the stadium, and like if the thing happens, there's actually a lot of major development happening in that kind of, I don't want to call it a quadrant because Philadelphia is much bigger than that, but that particular part of the city, like we started the top of the hour by talking about the Roundhouse and the development that's happening there. But there's also a lot of movement. The Chinatown Stitch project is happening. That it seems very positive at the moment, but there are, again, thinking about like all these missteps, and that is an awesome thing. It's a thing that community members on both Chinatown and Callowhill and kind of that, again, part of the city have advocated for a long time, is that cap. But it will have other consequences besides just capping the highway. But there's also 800 Vine, there's tons of private development. And so to me, I'm like, where is the plan for this part of the city that says, overall, taking a step back from all these developments, this is what needs to happen here from a community voice and perspective. And like, how are these individual projects accomplishing and kind of checking the box on these things? Because not one project isn't going to, single-handedly solve all of our needs around housing or all of our needs around small business. And so, how are we thinking about this more comprehensively?
Yeah, what's the strategy there? No, very good point. I'm wondering if you have any kind of tips. You've talked about equitable development. How can you spot the difference between something that's equitably developed and something that is harmful?
I mean, I feel like I've drunk the policy link Kool-Aid. So I'm like the core questions around who's benefiting from the development, who's paying, and who's deciding. And if you can answer those questions, that will usually clue you in as to kind of how this development will likely, shape or just impact a particular community or neighborhood.
Yeah, really great guiding questions. So a couple of the questions from the chat. You mentioned having ongoing conversations with local officials. Thoughts on the willingness of Parker mayor engaging with this project?
Yeah, so we actually have not had we are only through the primary. Has it been a week? So we have not engaged with our primary winner. However, we've had really good conversations so far. What I feel like I should just have the list in front of me, but Senator Nikhil Saval, Ben Waxman, Mary Isaacson, council people. There was a big change in council, obviously, so we're gonna have to revisit a lot of that. And to be honest, this is one of the reasons why being able to announce phase 2 just move so slowly is you want to make sure everyone is in the loop, everyone feels good and is supportive of the project before you just kind of go public with a thing. But so far, very positive reception. I will also just say it's very early in the process too for moving forward, and so of course people are like, yeah, this sounds great, but it's when you actually
get to it.
Yeah, that's when I feel like the clause can come out, but that's okay. I think that kind of dialogue is really actually healthy for a project of this scale. You want that kind of engagement and dialogue. And so, yeah, very, very open and welcoming of that. And then I should also just say we're beginning to talk to kind of community neighborhood groups as well. Again, with this emphasizing this is very early. There's no design to show you at this point. There's a range of options, but really this is an invitation for us to work together on moving forward with this project. And so we've been talking to Logan Square Neighborhood Association, Callowhill, kind of the usual characters. Community College of Philadelphia, I feel like I haven't mentioned them at all, but yeah, kind of engaging that institution. And so there's a lot of layers, there's a lot of people to get on board. But it's all really exciting, and it just really feels like just a really great time for the project and for Philadelphia. And yeah, looking forward to the work ahead.
Yeah, sounds like a very sound approach. I'm excited by it. So last question that I see on the chat, you mentioned you're from Chicago, which the Chicago River has an amazing intervention and includes recreation, leisure, and commercial elements. Any chance that you see, food, a beverage, some sort of market, any commercial components to future phases?
I think we will have to have that, because it's a large development, and so to not have those things, I feel like would be a missed opportunity. I should also say we're thinking pretty creatively about our financing at this point too. And so I think it will have to have, of course, with the blessing of the many different stakeholders that are at the table, but for such a large space and for just thinking about like ongoing operations and maintenance, I think there has to be some combination of those things. And it's also exciting too. I was just talking about Community College of Philadelphia. Like I think about just the entrepreneurship programs that they have there and small business development, and just thinking about like that element in a way is a lot more exciting to me than like the community development side of this project is actually in a lot of ways more exciting than the green space element to it. But I think all those things working together, I mean, the goal, of course, is to create a space that is buy-in for Philadelphia. And so I think, those elements are really key to making that come to life.
Yeah, there's so much possibility. You could incubate folks, like, yeah, amazing. So I think that's all the questions that we have. I want to thank you so much for giving us like a sneak peek of what's next for the rail park. And I'm going to pass it back to Eli to close us out.
You were slightly premature. We tend to do our
Sorry.
applause at the end because we ask everyone to turn their cameras on and give the virtual, if muted applause. That was wonderful. I personally am extremely excited to see where you're able to take this and where the group is able to take this, because it's an important project knitting together so many different constituents and stakeholders. So can you drop some links in the chat where people can go and support, and whether financially or with their volunteer time, or share ideas and thoughts and whatnot?
Yes, and this reminds me, I'm also going to plug, we are doing a big block party on June 10th. It is free and open to the public. We have live music, food, drinks, vendors, tons of family activities. Please come and pray for good weather too. But I'm just going to drop our rail park website in here, and all of our information is available there. So
yes, here I just dropped the link in for that block party as well. So yes, thank you again. We will continue to bug you and bring you back as more and more items come up, and feel free anytime you want to stop in and take the floor for a few minutes if you have anything to announce or share with our group.
Awesome, thank you.
Well, June 29th is the next time we'll be together to talk about the circuit trail. So please go get your free tickets there, and I will look forward to seeing everybody then. Thank you. Have a great Thursday.